When we talk about this principle, we actually also talk about the other principle we have seen so far, because exaggeration can be applied to all these other principles as well. Exaggerate the timing, the overlap, the squash and stretch, and the anticipation. What does it mean? It means to go out from the limit of the realism and exaggerate the action and the poses to make the result more instantly readable for the user. It can be applied on key poses, pushing lines of action, exaggerating the way you represent a feeling or an action in breakdowns, exaggerating the arcs and the amount of squash and stretch, and breaking some joints. Character design, exaggerating shapes, proportion, and caricature elements. Story, exaggerating a concept, an action to make it stronger. Poses, exaggerating the representation of a mood or an action. And timing and spacing, make it more cartoony, exaggerating the contrast between acceleration and deceleration of a movement. But as animator, we have to focus just on some of these. But it's not as simple as the word will suggest. The amount of exaggeration is based on the style of your animation, the storyline, and the intention of the scene. When we exaggerate, we must be sure that it helps to make the action more clear, add energy to the action, and make it more readable when you have few frames to show an acting or a feeling. Exaggerate doesn't mean to do something completely out of any physics principle and realism, but it means do something starting from realism and exaggerate it to make it more interesting, enhancing, and push an idea. It gradually increases depending on the level of cartoon style of your animation. Do it in key poses, pushing your poses to clearly show the mood, always based on the style you need. You have different solutions depending on how much realism you want. In this example, we can see a normal jump and this other one more cartoony and exaggerated. If we compare the two jumps, we can see that the first one is more close to reality. There's a small anticipation. The jump distance is not so long, so this is very close to how a real jump looks like. In this other version, I made a bigger anticipation. The hip goes much more down and the arms raise more. Then I overstretch the body during the push, especially the legs and the chest. The jump is higher and there's a slower spacing when he stays in the air, so he jumps very fast and then decelerates in the air. Then he accelerates when he falls. I stretch the body again, and when he lands, I made the feelings that he's heavier, with the hips that goes very low and a big pose before he stands up again. Also, the jump distance is longer compared to the more realistic one. Also can use it in breakdowns when you broke a joint during an action. This is not reality, but it's an exaggeration of the arc that you will create with this movement. So this is a very clear example of how to exaggerate a movement. In expression, you can exaggerate the organic feel of the face, make it super flexible, exaggerate the asymmetry, exaggerate the length of action, just as for the body poses, to make the acting and the feeling more convincing. When you stretch a face, push it to give the idea that the head and the muscles could really stretch as a balloon of water. Stretch the eyes, the mouth, and the neck, and use the shoulder to emphasize the push upward that we have during the take. Do the same when you squash the head, press it in the chest and raise the shoulders. Squash and press the eyes between the eyebrows that push down and the cheeks that push up. Now let's see how to exaggerate the timing and spacing and the squash and stretch. Starting from a realistic bouncing ball, you can create a version more cartoony and exaggerated. When the ball is in the air, we have a slower spacing, and when it falls, we have a big acceleration. We can also exaggerate the amount of squash and stretch, keeping the stretch longer during the fall and make a bigger squash in the contact. In this simple animation, you can exaggerate the timing and the spacing to add energy to the scene, and if this would be a character, we would have two different jumps, and the exaggerated one with more contrast in the spacing and an exaggerated use of the squash and stretch result more cartoon and appealing.